everyone, and welcome to our afternoon session. I want to thank you all for tuning in to another session for today. And this afternoon, we're going to be covering conducting a school analysis. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Deacon now to kind of introduce Camille, and he's going to be doing some speaking today as well. So I'm going to go ahead and let him take it over.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody had an opportunity to go out and grab a quick bite to eat. It's good to see some of you make it back. It's my pleasure to introduce Camille Krowick, who is with the Champions for Grant County, and it's a coalition located in northern Kentucky, just south of the Ohio-Kentucky border. They are going into year 5 of their DSC. Done some amazing things over the last 5 years as a coalition. They've been around for about 15 years, roughly. Is that correct, Camille?
Yes, it is. And you're sharing one of my slides. You're jumping the shark a bit.
Oh, I not want to jump the shark, so I'm going to play a font. I mean, I can wear that really cool ski belt, though.
I'm for it. I'm here for it.
Today's presentation is going to be all about school analysis, why to do one, how to do one, successes and challenges. And so let's turn it over to Camille, and we'll go from there. Thanks, Camille.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see if I can figure out how to share my screen without giving you guys everything, right? Okay. So like Deacon said, my name is Camille. I am the coordinator for a coalition in Kentucky called Champions for Drug-Free Grant County. I'll show you in a little bit more about where we are and who we are and that sort of thing. But first, Deacon and Jess asked me to share a little bit today about our school policy project that we've been doing. I believe we're going into our 3rd year. It's been quite the process, especially over the last year as we really got into policy development and implementation. And then COVID. So we were making progress, as I'm sure a lot of you felt like you were making progress on projects. And then March came, or March in Kentucky came, which is when we shut down here. So it's been challenging. So I'm just going to share a little bit about, how we did it, why we did it, some of the things that we saw come out of that project, and then some of the things that are still to come for that project. So before I kind of start, I'm going to turn it back to Deacon. And let him share a little bit about what it is and how what the partnership with ECS looks like.
It helps if I unmute and take the video off.
Yeah, it does. I know. I was like, oh no, he disappeared.
So the idea of a school analysis came about when we began talking with coalitions and schools, trying to figure out a path forward in the age of schools being asked to do so much additional stuff other than to help parents educate their children and to provide support and tools in the education of young people in our communities. Because our schools want to do more. They want to make sure that where they're addressing whole child, they want to be able to be that constant and steady role models and teachers and informers and supporters in community. But so much of what they're being asked to do, they're not paid to do. And so much of what they're being asked to do falls in addition to their educational mandate. And so in conversations with coalition people, community people, and educators, there's this idea that schools can do more by looking at what they currently do, making sure they're getting the most out of their non-education opportunities, and making sure that they're being as consistent as possible. And thus a school analysis was born. And a school analysis is designed to do a deep dive into the policies, programs, practices, and infrastructure that support whole child efforts in any school district. Whole child could be as specific as substance use, could be mental health, social emotional learning, all these other things beyond academics. And so it really consists of a comprehensive review of the policies that are written, the practices that are used to implement policy, the programs that are used to support practice and policy, and then the infrastructure used to deliver. The idea is that if we can figure out how we get the most out of those opportunities, the school then has the ability to say, here's everything that we're doing. Here's everything that we can do, and we can do no more, because we're still only responsible for the children 190 days a year, 6 hours a day. And it's even different now because of COVID and the online and the virtual and the hybrid learning that we have. And then being able to point out opportunities for community to take over where only community can. And it does allow for to make substantive improvements in districts, in both district outcomes, individual outcomes, and community outcomes, with very little financial investment, if any financial investment at all, which I know Camille will talk about throughout the course of our conversation. So that's what a school analysis is, and kind of a little bit about the history and the why as well. So it's based off of community-based participatory research, which says that anytime you engage in research, anytime you engage in evaluation at the community level, there are two experts, there are two learners. You have the people who live, work, play in the communities, understand context, understand systems, understand politics and people. Then you have the outsiders, such as us, that understand the methods and processes and analysis techniques that we can bring to bear for improvement and understanding. It's when these two come together that makes a strong evaluation or strong research and a strong understanding. The process includes a thorough review of quantitative data, including but not limited to, what people's jobs they are, what's in their job descriptions, what's in their contracts, what are they responsible for, the written policies, the written in programs, the money where's the money going? What's the support? What doesn't support? What are we trying to get to with our whole child outcomes? Our non-academic outcomes. What are we trying to get to? So reviewing curriculum maps is part of the process too. How much time do we spend on whole child as an academic deliverable? Where is it integrated? Where is it not integrated? How do we communicate as a school district, at the district level, at the building level, at the classroom level? What does this look like? How does this happen? What does consistency look like? And this is bolstered by key informant interviews, and we do, I can't remember how many we did for you, Camille. It's usually in the 30 to 40 range across the entire spectrum. We do focus groups with kids, focus groups and listening sessions with kids and sometimes community members. And then there's some sort of youth data collection over and above that, whether it be some sort of additional youth survey, some sort of youth summit. There's always an additional youth component to gather that information as well. So the methods are pretty well established and well validated, and it is I keep saying this, it's a deep dive, it's a deep dig into data, which I think Camille will definitely highlight over the course of this conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing all the really technical terms that I struggle with. I appreciate that. So just to give you a little background about our community, this map kind of shows exactly where we're located within the Northern Kentucky region, and as kind of relation to Cincinnati. So Cincinnati is definitely to our north. My community lies on a major interstate, 75, which runs, from, I believe, somewhere in Michigan all the way to Florida, right? So we have a major interstate that passes right through our community, connects us to Lexington and to Cincinnati. And so, we have a lot of people that travel that highway every day, right? So within the community, we have about 25,000 people is our population. We have 2 school districts. So we have Grant County Schools, which serves as the fiscal agent for my Drug-Free Communities grant, and then we have the Williamstown Independent School District. Like Deacon said earlier, our coalition started in 2003, so we actually just had our 17-year anniversary. I have been working with the coalition in some capacity since 2010, whether it was just serving as a prevention specialist through a community mental health center, and then now in my Drug-Free Communities coordinator position since 2016. So a little bit about our school district. We have Grant County Schools has 1 high school, 1 middle school, and 4 elementary schools, which serves about 3,500 students. Williamstown, all the students are in 1 building. We have elementary on one end and middle and high on the other, and they serve about 780 students, which also includes some of their Head Start and preschool numbers, which are kind of located on campus, but in buildings towards the back of the campus. The schools are only about 5 miles apart. I think our board offices technically are maybe only 2 miles apart, but feel very different. If you're within our community, people would tell you that Williamstown almost seems like a private school, even though it's not. It's publicly funded. It is a traditional school. There is no non-traditional, well, that's not true in the middle of COVID, but there's usually no non-traditional instruction happening, right? So it's a public school district, but people do feel like they feel very different, and size just isn't the only way. But that's just kind of a little bit there about our schools. So why we chose this project. So about 2 years ago, maybe even 2.5, we had kind of entered into about halfway of our grant. We had done a lot of work. Previous to DFC funding, we had done tobacco policy. We had done a lot of media campaigns around underage drinking, around youth marijuana use, kind of all of the big things we had done. And so we were sitting and really thinking, okay, what's next? And what would benefit our community the most, what would benefit our youth the most. And this kind of where this came, Deacon happened to be at a meeting where we were like, okay, what's next? Where do we go from here? We were also hearing randomly through conversations that parents and students didn't feel like policies were being implemented consistently across districts, across buildings, and people were struggling with that, and it was a lot of, and I'm sure you guys have heard some of these same things, why did so-and-so from the basketball team not get cut from the basketball team when he was caught with the same amount of marijuana that this other student that was potentially suspended for 2 weeks or something like that, so you could tell that there was definitely some inconsistencies. And so we really felt, okay, we need to figure out kind of what's going on there. And this was also graduation season when a lot of this was happening, or a lot of these conversations were coming out. We also found out that there was a very large party held in our community. And not that we don't have parties, but one of the things that we did find during this process is that a lot of our parties, even though we are a rural community, field parties aren't necessarily what our kids are doing. And but we did find out that one night after graduation, there was a very large party that there was, I think, over 300 kids there. And a lot of staff knew about this party. School staff knew about this party. And some didn't really know what to do with that information. They kind of they sat on it. They weren't sure if it was their role to step up and say, hey, there's this party, or to let the police know, or to let higher ups know. Because some of these kids, while some were definitely seniors, there were definitely some underclassmen there as well. And so what was the role that staff had, because they knew of the party happening prior to technically the end of the year. And so we really thought, okay, we need to define that role for our staff moving forward. And we need them to know that, if it's more than just if you hear something, say something, but maybe starting there, and what does the district expect of you, and not to put more on you than you would want, but just to make that role clear. There was definitely some staff who say, oh, I know what my role is in the situation is, and my role is to let people know this party's happening, where other staff didn't feel as secure in that situation. And so we just wanted to kind of clear those things up for our staff and our students within the buildings. So first things that we started doing was kind of collecting data. We really felt like we had to build coalition support, not for the project itself. Once we sat in a meeting and we said, okay, this is what we're choosing to do for the upcoming year, our coalition was behind it. It was more of finding the right people to help the project move forward. Having people send emails. My project director, who retired actually just last week, served in a role where she was able to influence the superintendent's written emails, and the fact that she basically wrote a lot of his emails for him and was able to help craft an email to staff saying, hey, when you see this survey, I need you to take it. or if someone is sending an email to you asking for an interview, I want you to do that interview. And so that was really important because our first round of emails went out kind of unanswered. But then when an email came from the superintendent saying this is an expectation and I want you guys to be as compliant and helpful as you can, then we started getting responses much quicker. And so I would recommend that if people are looking into ways to get staff response, find a person that's able to influence emails from the superintendent, and that's super helpful. So the data collection. This part is a little challenging depending on your role within the district that you're hoping to do this project within, what your relationships might look like. My district, thankfully, both districts are very open with data. We don't have a problem sharing data. My districts will tell you, we know we have problems. Please send someone to help us solve them. And so that's always been easy for me, but it's been more of, with this project in particular, just finding out who has what. Getting people to respond in a timely manner was another piece. And I'm sure Kelly, if she's on here, is probably laughing because we're waiting on an email right now for my other school district. But it's been challenging. And it's not because they don't want to share it, but even right now, there's just a lot going on. And so just making it a priority for people can be challenging. And while there's a lot I can do as a employee of this school district, I still only have certain rights and roles within certain systems. And so I can't always just go in and grab things. I need someone to be able to point me in the right direction or give me the rights to be able to access that. We also did the informant interviews and listening sessions like Deacon mentioned. Again, this was a big role for ECS. I helped coordinate where possible. I found rooms. I provided, I think we provided food for some of the youth, just certain things to get the kids there, making sure that they knew that the answers were confidential, that they weren't going to be in trouble, that, the principal wasn't listening or the superintendent wasn't behind the door, anything like that, just to make sure that people understood that we're really just trying to help and that we weren't there to punish anybody or to make anybody feel bad about what might have been happening. And I feel like, and I think Deacon would say the same, are the participants in interviews and the focus groups were all very vocal and open and willing to share. We learned a lot during that time, and which was really nice. And we had a lot of eyes open, and we felt like we knew a lot, but it was really good to kind of hear some new things that we just didn't know about. And we'll flip slides. So what we learned. So right off the bat, Deacon had an interview with one of our elementary principals, and right after the interview, he called and said, hey, that principal says her staff needs some training around ACEs. Can you help? Absolutely. That is something that I can pull together. We don't have to wait until the end of the project to pull that together for her. I had a trainer in that building within a month, I think, to provide that training for her staff. And so it was easy. And, and then it looked like as well that to the district that I'm following up on what I said I was going to do, that I'm providing a service back, that we're not just taking, and then in a year we might give back. No, I'm giving back now. If you have an immediate need, and that I can help with, I'm going to help you with it. So and it created a really good relationship with her, and the fact that she now knows if there's something substance use related that she needs help with, that she can turn to me, and I'll try to get it done as quickly as I can, and with my resources if that's possible. We also learned during some of our listening sessions with our students that they were saying, consequences are not being consistently enforced. So again, like what I said earlier about the basketball players and things like that, they were saying it wasn't even necessarily all the athletes were getting special attention. It just kind of depended on who the pets were in the building, so to speak, and what they were able to get away with. A lot of the kids told Deacon, the band gets away with basically murder, and we're not happy with that. And that's not fair to the rest of us. And what can we do about it? I mean, it was a very, very hard line that those students drew about band. And, it was a little bit of a hard pill to swallow, because in our community, and I'm sure in a lot of your communities, the band is held to very high regard here. We have been state champs a lot, and it's considered an honor to be in our band. And so to have that come into us and then to have to relay that to others was sticky. And I know that in an upcoming project that we have, we're probably going to learn the same thing, and they are also experiencing the same thing. So it's challenging there to say, okay, well, we need to address this issue here with these kids. The other thing that we learned is during that particular summer, we had about 35 staff leave the high school, including two out of our 4 principals, and then just so many teachers. And so we had a lot of new incoming staff. And so the kids were very willing to say, we know who will get away with what, and that we can do this in front of so-and-so and they won't say anything, or, oh, you need to avoid the new teacher down the hall because he will crack down on you faster than anybody else in this building. And so we thought, okay, well, what are the new teachers hearing at orientation that maybe the teachers of more tenure need to be reminded of, or vice versa? You know, what are the new ones maybe not hearing in orientation as far as expectations of their responsibilities that they need to be told, so that the older teachers do know? And so we definitely had to think about that and what that was going to look like kind of on a district level. We also learned that we had some existing prevention services within the district, but they were not being implemented with fidelity. Our middle school was doing life skills. We were making photocopies, which life skills is a very expensive curriculum, but they were also shortening lessons. There just wasn't a fidelity piece there. The 4 elementary schools were all doing something completely different. And so when they all merged into a middle school and a high school, the consistency, again, wasn't there. And while some of them were doing the precursor to life skills, the other ones weren't. And so we thought, okay, we need to figure out how to make that piece more consistent across the district. And then some not so easy wins, and I'll share a little bit more about this. During the middle of all this as well, we realized our district said, okay, we have a big vaping problem here, and we need to address it. And so they, came and said, what would you guys recommend as a policy? And Deacon and I were like, oh, they're asking us. This is so exciting. Like, here, this is what we've been waiting on. And so we provided our policy recommendation, and then we watched them tear it up and light it up with a match, and go basically scorched earth with a vaping and tobacco policy. And so while we were excited that they asked for our input, it was really hard to then watch them take that and multiply it, I'm not kidding, by like 500. I think our 4th offense, their fine might be $500. So it's just an astronomical amount for students. And so it was really challenging. And we're a rural community with high poverty levels. It's just a very challenging policy. And so we were excited for the relationship building and thought that was a win, but then the policy fell a little short of what our expectations were as a coalition. So like Deacon said, when we began to make recommendations to our board, to our administration, we kind of built them on these 4 areas: program, policy, practice, and infrastructure. So when we looked at program recommendations, we knew that we needed to have an evidence-based and developmentally appropriate prevention programming in all the elementary schools. Again, this is just for consistency. We wanted our students to have something. Some of the schools, I think one of the schools wasn't doing anything other than just maybe the teacher doing some SEL stuff on her own in the classrooms, which we know isn't really enough. We also wanted to incorporate some information about substance use into some of their core subjects, like science, and math. What can you do in those science or in those lessons to incorporate some information? What can the students come up with a presentation about something, or design a lesson around a substance use topic that affects them in kind of a timely manner? A comprehensive health curriculum was also something that we needed to see. That isn't something that we have right now. The health piece, while it's taught fairly heavy in elementary schools, kind of falls apart when it gets to middle and high. Almost in high school, it's almost non-existent. And so unless the students opt into it because they need a filler for graduation, but when if you have kids that are high performing or looking for college courses, sometimes that health course doesn't make their priority list for a class because they need something else. And so we want something that all of our students can have kind of across the board. The other thing that's really good about this policy analysis is that ECS does a really great job of not only stressing the role of the coalition in this process, but the relationship that the coalition can have with the districts, the relationship that the coalition has with the community, and stressing that, keeping that partnership between us and the district was really important. And so it was really good to see, I'm just going to say, is when I'm handing this report to my superintendent, to see that it says, oh, you really should build on this relationship with the coalition, because the coalition can provide this, this, and this. And so it was good to have that kind of piece behind me as someone who maybe struggles a little bit with kind of keeping that relationship moving, because it's a school district and can be challenging. So ECS does a really great job with that as well. And I was really happy to see that. And I know that my project director and even my superintendent was too. So some practice recommendations. So when we kind of started here, we wanted, a lot of this information came from those conversations that we had with staff and students. Again, people felt the consequences were not being enforced consistently. So we knew that this needed to be addressed, and we wanted our staff to know what the policies were. We wanted them to know what a violation of that policy really meant, and what what consequences should they dole out when the time came. We also wanted our administration to know that what their obligations were for kind of understanding issues and addressing issues as they presented themselves in the building. A lot of times there was some clear, misconceptions around what they felt like was important at that moment. And I know that, sometimes in some of these buildings, when it feels like the whole building's on fire, that addressing a tobacco issue isn't that important. But when the building is no longer on fire, it's important that we talk about what these students are facing every day. And a lot of our students have some substance use issues. So or facing issues at home. And so what can we do here in the building to support them? So some of the other things is that when we talked about our athletic code of conduct, the guidelines on how those violations were being investigated were not very clear, and kind of left a lot up to interpretation for the coaches, for the players, for their families. And we had a history of students facing a violation, and then because of weird little loopholes in the policy, being able to skirt that violation and get back on the field within a day. And so we had heard that from the athletic director. And so we're like, okay, we need to make sure there's no loopholes, because if a student has a substance use violation, we need them to know what's going to happen, and not to think, okay, well, I found a loophole, I'm going to go through it. We also heard from staff that when they said something, if they said something about a student and a substance use issue, they didn't really have an outcome. No one ever followed up with the staff about that outcome. And so there wasn't a way for a staff member to say, well, I referred Camille to the office because I caught her smoking in the bathroom. Camille appeared back in class within 5 minutes, and that was it. And so our staff felt like, okay, is there really any point in me referring students to the office for these behaviors or these incidents when I don't know what's going on? And it feels like nothing is being done, because when the student appears back in your classroom almost simultaneously, it's like, well, did anything happen? And so our staff kind of felt powerless in that moment. And so we didn't want that to happen. So we recommended that there be some kind of system. Now, clearly there's privacy in place, but we felt like that the person who made the referral should have some type of feedback loop to say at least, well, this is what the student is facing now, and how can you be of support to that student? Maybe that student's going to need your support as they face a road of recovery moving forward, or they're trying to quit using e-cigarettes, and so maybe they're going to need you, and you're their teacher, and you're in this classroom with them 5 hours a day. How can we help you help them during that process? The other thing is that it is understood that staff will monitor bathrooms and hallways during breaks. That's understood, that's understood, but it is not specifically written in a lot of their job descriptions. And so what we were finding is when the bell would ring, some staff would step to the door because they're kind of watching for fights or whatever, or people making out in the hallways, right? But they weren't necessarily running to the bathrooms, or if they would get caught with a kid, they would not end up in the hallway at all, because it is only 3 or 4 minutes. And so we stressed our superintendent in a meeting almost about this, that it was really important that our staff understood what their role was in the hallway, to make sure that, if they had to take turns, they had to take turns. If they, maybe wanted to pay someone to sit in a bathroom and kind of monitor what was going on, maybe that's somebody you can stipend that for, just to keep the incidence of tobacco use and vaping down in the bathrooms as well. So it was important that our staff understood what their role was going to be. So policy recommendations, we said that we needed to expand our athletic code of conduct to include all extracurricular activities. So again, this is where we're really getting into those kids that are in band, the kids that are in other clubs. Staff felt that the really only clubs that were considered substance free were athletics, and the staff they felt like all their clubs and extracurriculars should be considered substance free, and that was a desire of theirs. And so that's what we recommended. We also recommended that the policy be year round. So even in the off season, if a student would be caught with something or caught doing something, that could potentially impact what happens in the on season. So that was also a recommendation that we made there. We also made changes to how and when athletes were being punished for violations. And so we changed, some of first offenses, and second offenses levels like that. One of the things that we recommended that turned out to be very controversial was that, and this was, something that Deacon had suggested, and I thought it would go over well, and it did not. And we can talk about why in a little bit, but was that when a student is caught with some type of substance use violation on a team, that they still be allowed to practice, but they not be allowed to participate in whatever the event is. So if it's a baseball game or basketball game, they can't necessarily participate in the game. And the reasoning behind that is so that the team doesn't suffer. And one of the reasons that Deacon really brought it up was around wrestling. And so if you have a student that there's only two, him and another person that's in his Deacon, I don't know, weight wrestling terms, weight class, then that student could potentially suffer because his partner is being punished. And so we made this recommendation, and our athletic director hated every minute of it and wanted kids kicked off right away. And we explained, we're trying to not punish the entire team. We're trying to not punish the coach. We're trying to kind of keep it so that not everybody is facing consequences because of this one thing, but also it keeps the student here. It keeps the student engaged in that sport and in the school. And that's really what we're trying to do, right? It's trying to keep that engagement, because if they lose that engagement and that's the only thing they have, then that student is really going to pay the consequences on the other end of that. If that's the only thing keeping them in the building every day, or the only thing that's really keeping them substance free, and they lose it, well, then that student's going to have a lot more dire consequences. So that's really what we were trying to prevent there. And our athletic director was having none of it, really. The other things that we kind of recommended were to expand the code of conduct to include student drivers as well. And especially as far as drug testing, they're not currently included. And so we really wanted to make sure that, if by including them, we were able to almost cover every student coming into the high school building with this expansion of the code of conduct and drug testing policy. But then if a student is coming onto campus or going off of campus and they are high and or drunk, that could potentially impact school buses, other students leaving campuses or coming on campuses, and could turn into, quite the mess for the district and for families, right? So we were trying to prevent that as well. And then the consequences. So when we looked at our code of conduct, there might be an offense listed like possession of tobacco, and it would be listed as a level 1 offense. Well, when you got to level 1, there was about 30 things that could happen, and they were all very vague. And it was really left up to interpretation by administration. I think those are the words it really said in this level 1 description. That was entirely too vague, and it really led to multiple interpretations by administrations. And so then that's where the kids were getting the inconsistencies. The kids were not making this up. They were seeing it as it was happening in front of them. And they knew that, no, these are not being enforced consistently because this is what it says in the policy. So we're like, okay, we need to also make that a little tighter and get that, make that everybody can understand what's expected. Infrastructure. We did feel that a district-wide prevention plan would be an asset to the schools. We want everybody to know what's expected when it comes to prevention programming, when it comes to policies. And as a coalition, we wanted to be involved in the development of this plan. So we want our school district to rely on us for the steps of this plan, for what's to come down the road with this plan. We want to be the experts for them. And we want to be the ones that they come to when they need assistance. And slowly but surely, I would say that's happening. We're still working on the plan, but people know to email me or call one of the coalition members and say, I hear this is happening, or this is what's going on. Can you help? And so it's been a really good relationship builder for us as a coalition, even though we've existed for 17 years. It's been really good for people to know that they can come to us when they need help with this type of issue. It also goes a long way towards the sustainability of this project, in that, if the coalition goes away tomorrow, which, we're entering year 5 of DFC funding. I don't want to say we're going to go away, but interest may wane, right? If we have this plan in place and it's there and it's steady and it's solid, then our district knows what to do with or without our coalition, and they know where to turn and they know what to look for. And so that was really important to us as well. We also collect a lot of, like I said, really large tobacco fines based on that new policy. And right now they're just sitting in a fund. And so we have asked that they go to support that prevention plan. We've also asked that we provided updated job descriptions to include staff responsibility to supervise students, and then to report violations that they know are occurring, whether that's on the bus or in the hallways, and include all job descriptions, not just teachers. So we're kind of talking about those unsung heroes that appear, bus drivers and our cleaning staff hear and know probably the most. And what's their role in those? When a kid gets off the bus and they're only what's the limit when they're a foot away from the bus or they're a foot on the bus? What's that look like there? And what's the bus driver's role and responsibility in those moments? And just making sure that everybody's really clear. Again, just making sure that everything is really clear. And then again, continue those community partnerships is also really important and was really stressed in this report. So what's next? We did present our findings to our Board of Education. They approved the report, which I don't know that you all can really see it, but here's our printed report. We had copies of this made. We provided it to our Board of Education members and some of our coalition members that have asked just to have it. It's kind of proof of all the work that we did during all the sessions. And but they approved the report, and the Board of Education said, "We support you. Now go forth." And so now it's all about making those changes that we talked about in those slides, and making sure that people are ready to work and willing to work during challenges, right? So some of the challenges that we face were communication with and to staff and students. Just again, things can fall in black holes, and there seems to be a large one in my district that sucks down emails, and making sure that people are communicating with us and to us and then with each other. There was some resistance to discussing some change within some of these buildings. A lot of the people just assumed that their way was the right way, and they didn't love to hear that their way was not the right way. And so a lot of that goes back to relationship building, which I know you all know that as coalition leaders. But if you have those relationships solid, people are more willing to talk and more willing to kind of come around. Our biggest challenge, which is completely shocking, was our unwilling athletic director, because he's very youth focused and very he is, I would say he would describe himself as very conservative, and so it was just very shocking to have him come in and he said, we're like, this is what we'd like to do with our code of conduct, and we want kids to be able to still participate even if they have a violation. And he was like, all my coaches will quit if that happens. I will lose every coach across every sport, which I felt was a little dramatic, but that's what he said. So we kind of had to take his word on it. And so then we kind of had to backpedal, right? And so we were in the middle of backpedaling a little bit, and then COVID hit. And so Deacon and I had worked a lot of hours, I think like last October through January, to get these policies in place and where we wanted them, and had them, final drafts. And then one day, COVID hit. And so everything stalled, unfortunately. And people were not willing to talk policy because we got to feed kids, and we're a impoverished school district, and our main role during the beginning of this pandemic was feeding our children. And so that's what it was about. It wasn't really about anything else. And so that's kind of where we are now, unfortunately, is that COVID, like for some of you all, has stalled this project. And we actually have started it in Williamstown. And I'm sure Kelly, wherever she is cracking up, because we have sent a huge data list to my other school districts saying, here's all the things that we need. And COVID has also stopped that. So, they're like, we'll get it to you. And then we wait and we wait and we wait. So I keep telling Kelly that I feel like as we get a little further into fall, then maybe things will calm down. I don't know that that's true, because I think it's really hard on these school districts to know what's coming and what's coming around the next corner, right? So our successes, we collected a lot of information. We have a lot of really solid, good information about our district, about what our students are facing, what our families are facing. We do have, again, we have this really strict e-cigarette policy, which our district counts as a win. Our district counts as successful, even if Deacon and I don't like it, and we want to tear it up and light it on fire. They really like it, and they support it 100%. But the win from that is that they were willing to make a policy change when, you know, the time seemed dire, and they were willing to address an issue as it was coming head on at our district, even if they went, you know, scorched earth, like I said earlier. So people were willing to share information and knowledge. I don't think Deacon had one interview, or Kelly had one interview where somebody wasn't willing to talk. You know, he even met with my SRO at the CADCA forum in DC one year, and I think they had a very lengthy conversation, or my school resource officer, sorry. I had a very lengthy conversation in the middle of DC about the school districts and what was happening. And so people were willing to share that information. It was just making those connections at the beginning. We had our board support. We had superintendent support. He still supports, you know, the project. He just moves a little slower than I would like. I would like him to pick up steam and pick up the pace a little bit, but we're working on that as well. And again, it created recognition for our work within the district. People learned our name. People knew who we were. You know, for those of you who count your social media impressions, you know, I had staff liking my Facebook pages. I had staff finding me on Instagram and you know, and sharing things, which was very exciting to see them, you know, not just knowing who we are, but engaging in just even social media content, which sometimes feels like a really big win. You know, in these days and times, if they're willing to share it, then they believe in it, and they're willing to put their name behind that message as well, which was really fantastic to see. So some things to consider. I don't know, Deacon, if you want to also chime in here about some things that you probably have as well, but your relationship with the school, you know, maybe it doesn't have to be your personal relationship, it's your coalition's relationship, your project director's relationship, whoever it might be. Find that person that has a really good relationship with the school, that can ask for things without being turned down, that can make enough noise that some things happen, and without being, you know, condescending or, you know, being looked upon as an annoyance. That's really important, is to find that person that can help with that. Commitment of the school to open their data. So we didn't really face a huge issue with this, but I think some districts will hold tight. I know some of the districts even north of me clinch onto their information tightly. But for us, it was really just, you know, finding the right person to ask. And we met with the superintendent kind of starting a project, and he said, we were like, here's what we need. And he said, oh, this is the person you ask. Here's what you need. Here's the person you ask. So that was great. So we would go to that person, and I would say, oh, Mr. Matt Morgan sent me to you and said you would have this information. Can you give it to me? And they were like, oh, well, if Mr. Matt Morgan sent you here for it, then I'm absolutely going to hand it over. And so just having that, you know, that relationship was very helpful in those moments where you felt like you were asking for sticky information, especially when we got into some like budget stuff or, you know, what schools were spending on certain things. You're like, oh, that gets a little itchy. But, you know, if Matt Morgan said I could have it, you know, the superintendent said I could have it, then the person was more than willing to kind of provide that for us. The time commitment. So it says 6 to 9 months. I feel like this is our 2.5 years into this. It has been lengthy, right? And now as we're heading into a separate project for Williamstown, you know, we committed over the summer, and we're already 4 months into it, and we've not had a lot of movement. And I think that's because of COVID. I think COVID just has really slowed it down, because they were very excited to do it. But they're also the only district in the state that went back to school on time 5 days a week when the school year began. And so we're facing some challenges around that too. So COVID, right? COVID is just the end all be all of all the bad things that are happening. Our reputation, there's a lot of districts that are going to be concerned with this. So I think you need to think about that. What does the district want? What are they going to look for? The good thing about the report is that it highlights all the good work. It tells the district what they're doing really well. And then it says, but here's a couple things that we could work on. And so the district, our board and superintendent responded very positively to it. They did not feel ashamed about this report. They did not want to hide it, or they were like, okay, we appreciate that. You know, we see now what we do really well, and we can celebrate those wins. And then here's the few things that we need to work on to make it even better. And so I think Deacon and I we did a good job. And we presented to the board of saying, here's what you guys are great at. Here's what we could be a little better at. And they responded positively, I thought, to that. And then the willingness to make substantive changes. So that's a challenge. And to me, that's my biggest challenge. When you look at COVID, obviously, but when you look at the other things on the slide, those other things weren't necessarily as big of a challenge for me and my coalition. But when it came to, rubber meets the road and people really saying, I'm going to make a change here, it got a little hard. And we really had to push for, and we're still pushing for some of these changes. And so now as we begin a new school year, policy changes, while they can occur mid-year, are more than likely going to occur over the summer prior to a new school year starting. So, Deacon and I've done all this work. We might have to revise them again, and then to look at next summer and moving into another school year. So, you have to think about those timelines for yourself as well. Like, when does your school district revise policy? When are they willing to put out a new policy? That sort of thing. Those things are all really important things to consider.
I just want to make a note on that. Everything was timed, and we went to the school board in August after it was all said and done. The school board looked at it. We had 2 meetings with the school board, made sure it was good. Moved it to the school board meeting. They approved it, and not only did they approve it, says we will support every recommendation in here. Now, what's your next steps? And in the next steps, the coalition said, we're going to write this policy, this policy, this policy, this policy. And they said, great, bring them to us, we'll approve them. And they gave us a year to do that. And then in the middle of it, so we did everything, or the coalition did everything right in terms of getting the data, getting the agreement, getting the permission to do all the policy stuff. And then, much like the project found in the middle of this, that things happen fantastic at district level. When it's at district, it's consistent, it's good, they follow science, evidence, whatever you want to call it. And then as soon as it gets down to the building level, it's like, oh yeah, no.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly what it is. And as prevention people, we always talk about working in silos, and it definitely felt like that. It felt like there was these, 6 individual silos around the district building, and that when things went those directions, things got very different.
Mm-hmm. And so that's been the challenge. I mean, is now negotiating. Correct me if I'm wrong, Camille, but negotiating between district administration and building level administration, and making sure they're actually saying the same things to each other that they're saying to the coalition and Camille and myself and other people that are responsible for this project. That's a challenge. And I think there's great successes happened, but a lot more is available once we get the buildings to stop playing, I guess, quite frankly, not hiding. Once they stop trying to create their own little fiefdom.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like, we have all these policies, you know what I mean? We drafted these policies for hours one day, or like multiple days in my office. And we got more hours to see each other writing policies than I think anyone was ever thought of. We did. And so it was really, it was challenging, and then when you felt like you were getting on a roll, or whatever, and then to have the athletic director come in and say all of his coaches would quit, and then he went and told the superintendent that they're all going to quit. And we're like, well, I mean, I think we even asked, can we survey them? Let us ask them what they think or what they would like to see in policies. And he was like, no, I'll do that myself. And so that's been a challenge, and in a very unlikely spot. So that would be a kind of a word of warning is don't consider someone an easy win over until you've won them over. Because I assumed he would be, just based on the human being that I know that he is, I just assumed we were good, we were golden, and we were not. And he has been a challenge moving forward. So.
Well, Camille, thank you so much for everything. I appreciate it. So on behalf of ECS, thank you for wanting to share your experiences with the group and your honest perception of successes and challenges around this. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Jess, I'll turn it over to you.